There we are. Hey, Team Healthy. Good Wednesday to you. Glad you're here. I've got my folks already lined up here on the live feed. Y'all have been chatting away with each other. Hey, real quickly, I noticed a couple of you have asked the question about the upcoming videos. Many of you know that about a day and a half before a video comes up, I put in my content section, I can put a premiere on it, is what they call it. And accidentally last night, I actually put the premiere on two. I clicked the one for Saturday first, like, oops, I didn't mean to do that. And I tried to undo it, it wouldn't undo. And so tomorrow I'm going to have the video on the paranoia. And then on Saturday, I'm going to have the video about maintaining patience with yourself. So just know that was a Dr. C goof up. I'm capable of that, dadgummit. I wish I was perfect, but I'm not. But nonetheless, that's all it is. So just know that I try to just kind of let you know in advance what's coming up. Hey, I've got something else I want to address with you too, and a couple of things. First, I get asked quite a bit about my politics and what I think about this person versus that person, and some of you are in different countries, and you're wanting to know about that. And you may have noticed that I choose to stay out of that. Whenever a person would come to my counseling office back when I was in my practice, when they came in, I didn't ask them, are you a Republican? Are you a Democrat? Are you an independent? What I would ask is, tell me why you're here. And we would go into that space, and that's the role that I would play. And I'm not a commentator on politics. I mean, my wife and I have our preferences and opinions, etc. But my preference is to address personal issues as opposed to commenting on topics that can be divisive, etc. like that. And on top of that, I'm not going to talk about movie stars or people in sports or whatever about specifics about their behaviors. That's for somebody else. Real quickly, I want you to be aware we've just started our promotions on my newest webinar. It's entitled "How Narcissists Rob You of You," and it's going to go up live in about 4 weeks, Tuesday, October the 8th. And those of you who are aware of my webinars, you can sign up for it. If you can't do it on the live feed, go ahead and sign up, and then we'll just send it to you whenever it's finished recording, and then it'll be yours. But just know, keep your eye out for that, and it's a good one. And it's one that I'm really excited about presenting. I have a whole lot of information about how narcissists rob you of you. So just keep in mind of that. Okay, today, many of you know that what I like to do is I like to pick up on questions and then kind of develop a theme around some of the questions that are there. And today, the theme that I have is, how did I get into such a mess with the narcissist? How many times have you been with this person, whether it's at work or in your family or someone you live with or a friend, etc., and you think, this isn't playing out the way I wanted it to? There's something really strange here. There's something way off. How did I get into this mess? And so you're trying to make sense of something that's nonsensible, and therein lies much of the problem. And we're going to get into that. Now, before I do, somebody sent in a comment just given the topic we're going to be discussing here today, I thought it warranted me reading this, and it kind of sets up the rest of the questions. Okay. Somewhere along the way, you know how I am in my comments. I like to ask the more pensive questions, and one of them is, why am I here? And when I say here, I don't mean inside my study or on 100 Main Street or whatever. Why am I here on this globe? Why am I here inside this body? Why am I here on this earth? So and who knows what I said, but this bit apparently triggered this person. And this person says, why am I here? And then they answer, to bring beauty into the world, to let my heart explore the world, and to nourish my soul until the day that I'm embraced by death herself. Life is not without struggle, without pain, or without hardship, but I can still be beautiful and peaceful and a wonder to behold. Now, this is a person who obviously has taken the time to say, I want to think about who I am. I don't want to think about where I'm going in my life. Now, in psychological terminology, we have a term for that. This is the intuitive. That's intuitive thinking that they're doing, going into the analytical thinking. And it's interesting when you try to figure out characteristics. The Myers-Briggs picked up on the intuitive along is kind of an offshoot of Carl Jung's philosophies, and they picked up on percentages, etc. Do you know what the percentage of intuitives are in the population versus those who are much more black and white and concrete? Would you have any kind of guess whatsoever? It's not nearly as high as we would want. Obviously, if we had real strong intuitives, then some of the problems we would have could be resolved. But it's roughly 25, 26, 27%, right along in there. That means roughly about 1 in 4 are the kind of individuals who say, let me think, let me delve and let me understand who I am and what's going on and what the meaning is behind my emotions or my reactions. And let's go into that space. That means about 3 out of 4 don't really think that way. And they're more of a, well, just tell me what to do. Or they can be black and white. Doesn't mean they're bad people, but they just don't think on that in depth kind of level. So if you're the kind of person that says, well, I like thinking analytically and I like thinking intuitively, know that you're outnumbered, which is why then you get to the point where you ask the question, how did I get into this mess? I'm someone who's trying to bring decency, just like this person says here. I'm wanting to understand why I'm here on this earth for whatever my allotted days are going to be. I'd like for you to join me in that. And sometimes you get with a relationship and they'll say, yes, that sounds like a great idea. And others, it's like, anyway, what do you think it's going to snow today? And that's about as far as they can go. So, with no further ado, let's dive into our questions here. The first question, and this is someone, and this breaks my heart when I see this, who's trying to come to terms with an adult son or daughter who has kind of turned in a direction they don't like. This person says, can a person become a narcissist after young adulthood? The couple in mind married at age 21, and over time, the wife has taken on the behavior of her overt abusive husband. The older children won't speak with any of them except in a superficial way. Now, I don't know if this is a mother or father or an observer or an aunt or an uncle, but someone is noticing, okay, you had this young couple, they married very young, and the husband turned out to be a very selfish and overbearing kind of a person, the way it puts it, overt and abusive, so anger issues. And so now the wife, who's married into this, and is in their early 20s, has taken on much of what that husband's ingredients are. Is that very common? In developmental psychology, you have stages of development, and probably the gold standard in explaining this would be Eric Erickson, and he talks about how you have a stage of development in the late adolescence and early adult years that we just refer to as the developing of the adult identity, and the way I break it down is roughly around age 18 through 25, something like that, where you're where you're getting more and more independence away from mom and dad. You're trying to figure out what you're going to do to support yourself, and setting yourself up to make a living, etc. And it's in that phase, ideally, that you would think, okay, I have certain influences from the past. I've had teachings that have been emphasized. What of those elements do I want to hold on to? What do I want to eliminate? How do I see myself a bit different from some of the outside influences I've had? And you can go into that kind of phase. Now, going back to what I just said about the intuitive, about 25% are the kind of individuals who will say, yeah, I like thinking like that. And they can be purposeful and they can be intentional. If you're not that kind of person, then what happens is we ask, well, then who are the influencers in that individual's life? Because that's going to play a great role in terms of what happens during that adult identity development stage. And unfortunately, what we have here is we have a 21-year-old young lady who marries somebody who's overtly selfish and abusive. And that person has become her primary influencer. And rather than her thinking, no, wait a minute, this isn't working. This doesn't fit with my philosophy of life. It's like, well, if that's the way the world rolls, then I'll just roll right with it. to the extent that she becomes pulled in, and there's obviously a codependent element there. I play off of you, you play off of me. I don't have enough of my own internal sense of strength to draw upon, and so can something like that happen? Can a person become narcissist in young adulthood? And the answer is, oh yes. And it's very strong and it's very prominent. And the way I put it is, the deeper you go, let's say you're now beyond age 25, 30, 35, 40, you still have time to start pulling out of it. By 40, you can see that most individuals are going to be pretty entrenched. Now, it is interesting. I tell folks that your best thinking doesn't even begin till you hit 40. And so there are some individuals, and these tend to also be intuitive types, or they at least have some ability in that direction. There are some individuals, let's say at age 40, 45, 50, who will ask, well, okay, I've had certain patterns in play and it hadn't really worked out. And these are those the individuals who might be prone toward a midlife crisis, but instead they make a midlife adjustment. And so there are times when people can adjust and take a look at what has and has not worked, and they can do that hard kind of work. But unfortunately, in the absence of your own internal, pensive thinking, then whoever happens to be in front of you tends to be the one that says, well, let me get inside of your head and let me explain to you how things are going to be. And if you don't have that, then it's necessary. Then that person's more susceptible. As an aside, you can't completely force a person to be an intuitive person, but the earlier a child is with respect to learning how to think about the whys and the choices and options and what they're going to do with free will and all, the earlier a child can learn how to do that, the better they're going to be, so that this doesn't happen in their adult years. I don't want to make myself out to be the paragon of perfection, because I'm not. But with my little 6-year-old granddaughter Lorelei, we there's one book that's one of her favorites, and it's about boys who have to choose. You have this situation and this situation. What should you choose? And it gives real life scenarios and all like that, and it has all sorts of different possibilities. And she picks up on it. And then later on, when she's got some things going on with her little 1-year-old sister or friends at school or whatever, it's like, well, let's talk about what you can choose. And you introduce the thinking to that child in a very early age, and the more that becomes baked in, then the more when they're 20 and 25 and 30, that's a skill set that they can pick up on. So in the absence of that, yes, you can be susceptible. Okay. Here's another question. This person asked, after trying to have a simple discussion with a narcissist who turned into a chaotic mess, I went minimal contact for a week. Just yes or no answers. By the way, we have a term for that. It's called gray rock. I'm just going to give you the minimal kind of responses. Now he's in the love bombing stage, and I have started talking more and telling him a little bit more about people we know, etc. And then the question is, why do I feel guilty about not being able to stay in minimal contact? So here you have somebody who, and I don't know if this is their partner they're living with, or marriage, or somebody that they're just real close to, but you have someone that's more or less, it's like, you know what? There's been this chaos in this relationship. We had a bad situation, and I need to pull back. And so she's gone gray rock, and she's decided I don't really need to get into it. But he comes back. Hey, come on, let's talk. And you're the greatest and all. And so she kind of gets pulled back, and all the while she describes that she feels guilty because she's not holding her ground. Is that a bad thing on her behalf? And my response is, hey, don't take that guilt on yourself. Okay. What happens is you can start with a notion that says, when we disagree, it doesn't have to become chaotic. We can do better, and I'm willing to do better. And then when that other person says, well, I'm not going to, and they just descend into the chaos, then yeah, it's going to create frustration. And you don't have to apologize for saying, this is not working for me. I'm hoping that in the aftermath of some of the difficulties, you can remind yourself, we can do better. I can do better. I want harmony. I want to have good conflict resolution skills, and so that's what's going on. And see, my question is, well, should you feel guilty for thinking that? The answer is, I think you ought to be glad that you think that way. What you're referring to as guilt would actually be more appropriate if we were to say, I feel sadness that he won't join me. Okay, that's different. Too many times people feel guilt when in fact what it is it's their grief that's going on. I've got we have some imperfections, not a shock. We have moments where we disagree, again, not a shock. I have the not only the ability but the willingness to talk it through. That's wonderful. And then I look over to that other person and say, "Please join me." And it's like, all I'm going to do is just kind of gloss it over, and let's see if we can just kind of get back. And then I feel guilty because I'm not holding my boundaries as well. And it may be that you'll need to listen to that part of it and decide, well, I need to figure out how deep I am capable of going with this person. Does this individual have the capability to reciprocate? And if the answer is no, then you have to reassess the validity and the tone and texture of the relationship. But allow yourself to have more of a sadness and a grief, but don't take the guilt on yourself. Guilt implies there's something blameworthy about you. And I don't think you need to accept blame for saying, I want to be a good communicator. I want to be somebody who shares decent ingredients. You don't need to do that. Okay. Um, all right. Another one. Why, and this is one that I know that many of you have experienced with people that you've been around for quite some time, narcissists. Why does the narcissist's destructive words and behavior typically get worse with the passage of time? Now, it doesn't always, but very commonly it does. And then that person goes on to say, most people seem to soften or mellow with age, at least some do. My malignant narcissist mother is 10 times worse at 82 than she was in her 30s. My covert narcissistic ex husband got more bizarre and irrational and manipulative and deceitful, and he was a professing Christian. In 11 years of marriage, I saw his heart become so hardened toward me that I had to leave. I do not understand it. So she has two primary individuals in her life, her mother and now her ex husband. And it's like as they age and as I got to know them better, man, it just got more and more intense. And then in the husband's case, when she says he was a professing Christian, what I'm hearing her say is apparently he had a belief system that he could have drawn upon to learn how to be more adept at knowing the nature of love and goodness and forgiveness, etc. Mom, you'd like to think she's 82 that maybe she's mellowed over time, but she hasn't. She's just gotten worse and worse. What is it that causes that to happen? Well, first, let's keep in mind what is it that will prompt any individual to make psychological changes. First and foremost, you have to say, I need to change. And therein lies the problem. It's step one. It's like we can't even get to step two because we can't get past step one. I blew it. There's something going on inside of me that needs to be different. There's something inside of me that's bothersome, and it's a pattern now, and I don't like what it does. I need to take a hard look at who I am. I need to take responsibility for myself. Is that what you hear narcissists say? Narcissists tend to, and again, this is something they won't admit, but they tend to operate with a type of codependency, and by that I mean they go into a feeding frenzy with other individuals, and they really are desperate for you to prop them up so that they can feel good about themselves. And as a result, whenever problems and strains and difficulties come along, they go straight into the external problem solving mode. What are you people out there going to do to make me feel better? And so their control can come across as loud and dominating and forceful, when in fact it's evidence of weak and dependent kind of attitudes that they had not come to terms with. And so if a person is all the way in, and let's say in this person's case, the husband's case, he's got a religious system that says, here's a way we can do life well. Or you have a mother, it's like, I'm getting older and I need to make sure that I leave a better legacy than this. They don't have the internal skills to draw upon because they've lived their life so externally based. And so, how did you get yourself into a mess like this with both your mother and your ex? Well, you perhaps assumed, or you hoped, or you wished that they could be that pensive, that thoughtful person that you would want to be, and you missed on your guesstimation of their willingness to go into that space with you. And frankly, if it makes you feel any better, you're not in small company on that one. I know, speaking personally, I've had individuals that I've known through the years that I was disappointed that it's like, I really have some things that you and I can discuss and go into. Join me, will you? And they may say later or up yours or who knows what, but they can't join you in that. And so that's not on you. Again, we go back and say that that creates a feeling of sadness and a feeling of regret with respect to the nature of the relationship. But you don't have to take that and say there's something inside of me that must be wrong. Some individuals, they're so stuck in their patterns of control that they can't say I need help. They have too strong of a need to prop up their ego. The false self is so totally in charge. The false self won't let them say, "Here's what's real about me." That pattern was so deeply entrenched and so deeply established that when it comes time to lay aside the false self, they cannot or will not do it. It's really sad when you once you begin seeing it. Um, okay. The next person asked the question: if the narcissist I live with sees any sign of happiness or excitement within me, he will immediately take it away. Why is that? Okay, so let's suppose you're at home and you say, "Hey, I had this really neat experience at work today," or "I was talking to a friend," or "I had an interaction with my brother," or whatever it might be, and I really felt gratified. It was good, and I think they did too. And so you're trying to share something of a positive nature, which we have a word for that. It's called intimacy. You're trying to kind of go into a little bit of a deeper sense of who you are and expressing something. And the narcissist comes back and says, "Well, what's the deal with you?" What you're seeing there is the narcissist's envy in play. Envy means that you have something going on that I wish I could have. And so you've got happiness and you have connection. And whether it's conscious or subconscious, there's an anger. And by the way, envy is a offshoot, or it's a subtle form of anger. You're expressing your positives, and the narcissist in their anger is thinking that should have been coming towards me. What's going on? Why can't you do that? So they illustrate how entitled they feel, and they illustrate that they have no empathy. And it's like, well, you think it's good, but it's not all that. And so she says that he'll immediately try to take it away. It's like, I can't stand it when something good comes to you because it doesn't happen to me. Why is that? Well, it must have something to do with you. It's like, I was just talking to you about a nice exchange that I had. Don't make it about my frailties. That's actually something good. A narcissist is like, nah, let's not talk about something good on the inside of you. Let's talk about me. And if something good doesn't happen to me, then it must be someone else's fault. And they have all this circular, weirdo kind of reasoning and illogic and wacky ways that they try to draw conclusions. That's what you're dealing with. And so these are people who have decided me taking responsibility for me doesn't work. Me lauding you when good things happen makes me feel less than because they're so competitive. And so that's what you're dealing with. And you just go right ahead and continue whatever it is you're doing that brings you joy with other individuals. And if the narcissist says, "Well, I can't deal with that," then my response is, "Yes, I see that." And then you go on and be who you are anyway. Don't let them drag you into their mud hole. All right. This next question, again, this is another one that's very common. This person asking, how do you deal with the shame and disappointment in yourself for falling into the constant baiting and blood sucking when you blow up at the narcissist and give them what they want. Now, all right, raise your hand if you've ever been in a situation where the narcissist baited you and you took the bait. Did it ever happen? You want to stay steady. You want to be the kind of person that says, "I'm bigger than this," and yet before you know it, you're down in the dirt. You're down in the pig pen with them. And there's somebody raising their hand. Several hands. Okay, and then it's like, "Damn gummit, it happened again." So, how do you deal with the shame and disappointment in yourself? First, the answer is own it. Remind yourself, yeah, you've heard me say before, we each carry what I refer to as the duality. I have the capacity for good, and I have the capacity for not good. And as much as possible, I want to make sure that the good side, comes forward much more prominently. But that other side does lurk on the inside of me. It's there, and I can't make it go away 100%. And so I'm going to have to own it. Now, the rest of it is start asking. We go back to the whole thing about choices and starting with a young child, teaching them how to have choices. Ask yourself the question: when I'm at this juncture, recognizing that I did not respond well to the narcissist baiting and I got hooked in my anger, what does that tell me about my anger? Is everything wrong with it? Many times the answer is not necessarily. Sometimes there's a valid message at the base of the anger. You may be thinking, I want to be treated with better respect, or the anger may be tied to your desire that says, I want to feel like my convictions are heard or respected. And so, it's not wrong that you feel the anger, but then taking it a little bit further, you can also ask, what am I going to do, as opposed to yelling or screaming or kicking or, throwing it right back at them. Those are always options. What are my better options? By the way, one of my books that I like the most is called The Anger Trap. You get pulled into their traps, and before you know it, you're responding like them. It doesn't mean that you cease having anger, but you come up with your own separate ways of thinking and being. And so, my defenses are triggered. What's that all about? And so you begin developing your own strategies of anger management, where your security comes from, what your communication style looks like, what's what the defenses are trying to do. They're not necessarily so helpful, and we call that insight. And that's what guys like me in the therapy office would do. I would break down those kinds of issues with the individuals in my office and say, okay, let's figure out what's going on inside of you. What's the root system? And you learn. You have wisdom and you grow. Now, how many times does a narcissist say, I'd like to join you in that? And the answer is, oh, they don't. They don't think about cleaner options. All they do is they love drawing chaos from you, because it allows them to take the focus off of the chaos within themselves. And as far as they're concerned, you know what? I think I came out the winner here today. This life is cool. And so they build themselves up by tearing you down. And when they tear you down, it's like, once again, I proved my superiority. And my thinking is, now, once again, you prove that you're not a very positive force in this world. That's all it tells me. And so when you find yourself in these scenarios and you think, how did I get into that thing again? Rather than just kicking yourself to the point where you feel completely debilitated, take whatever frustration or guilt or hurt that you feel and ask, what is my emotion trying to tell me? And what are my better alternatives? And then let's go with that, with the understanding that the narcissist is very unlikely to join you. And so you learn to individualize your efforts. And that was one of the huge things that I would teach my patients. Learn to individualize your own personal growth. Don't wait for the other person to catch up with you. Okay, now this next one, and this one breaks my heart. This person says, I see thousands of videos about narcissism. Thousands? That's quite a few, but anyway, a lot. But I've not found any so far dealing with normal parents of narcissistic adult children. Almost all references to parents suggest or indicate that they are the narcissistic one. What about the parents who are not? How should they deal with the situation? And I am so glad you asked this question. because guys like myself will say that in the early years, the narcissist, and you'll notice when I say this, I don't necessarily say, and mom did this to you or dad did this to you. But in the early years, in the developmental years of the narcissist, they did not learn to trust well, or they did not learn emotional management skills, or whatever things were taught to them, they didn't catch on to it. And then they wound up going deeper and deeper into the selfishness that's already on the inside of them. But then the question is it always mom and dad's fault? Well, in many instances, the answer is yeah, mom and dad didn't exactly give them the greatest send off. But what if mom and dad were pretty reasonable? Now, there's no such thing as a perfect parent. But let's say that mom and dad, it's like, as best we could, we tried to show what good, healthy communication's like. We tried to use reason. Uh, let's consider something here. First, studies will show that your temperament type or your personality type tends to be baked in an inherited kind of way. And that's roughly about 50% of who you're going to be. In other words, it's just kind of hardwired. And some individuals are hardwired to be more oppositional than others. And who knows what kind of genetics is involved in that. And so many times you can have a mother or a father who are very decent individuals, and they unfortunately have a child who's more hardwired in that negative kind of direction. Just by the way, just as some children are just naturally hardwired to be tender and gentle, some are not. And then in addition, when we talk about environmental influences, it's not always mom and dad. You can have some sibling issues that may create some problems, and sometimes it can be buried. You can have peer circumstances where a child thinks that in order to be in a peer group, I have to be this way versus that way. And so that can be an enormous part of an individual's development, particularly if they're getting many of the wrong kind of messages. And then in today's day and age, you have much more of an onslaught of media influences where the wrong kind of people can be teaching your kids all sorts of things. You can have circumstances at school. So, in other words, there are so many other possibilities. Even just in sports, uh, sometimes sports teaches team building. Sometimes sports teaches meanness. It all depends on who the influences are. And so let's be very careful that we don't lay all the blame at the feet of mother and dad. Sometimes it's there and it's glaringly obvious. Other times there are many other factors at play. And so my heart goes out to you if you think, and it's true. I really do. I'm doing my best, but influences took over, and I did not get good results. Let's love you, and let's. I want you to continue in being your own decent self, and then as you're able, you still continue to try to have your influences, but know there's a whole lot of other stuff going on that doesn't necessarily come out in public. Don't allow yourself to be so ashamed that you just hang your head. There are way more people in your boat than you might think. Thank you for asking that question. Okay, the next question here. Do you think that the harder that person tries to create a public persona, the more they're trying to hide, or am I overthinking it? And the answer is no, you're not overthinking it. Okay. So you have this person that notices, okay, when I'm around that narcissistic person, they're one way. But then when they're out in public, it's like, man, they're really working hard to try to prove how nice they are, or helpful, or friendly, or accomplished, or whatever, connected. And it's like, why are you doing that? Because you don't do that with me at home, or you don't do that with me down back at work where, I'm the one that sees you. What's going on there? Or am I just overthinking it? Let's keep in mind that narcissists are psychologically lazy. Um, what they want is they want other individuals to just laud them, and as long as they can get that, then they're totally happy. But they can be in a very strong cover-up mode. It's like, well, you know, all I want to do is just what's simple, what's easy, what's superficial, and if I can show myself to be one way, then that's fine with me. And that behind the scenes, it takes a whole lot of work, and they don't want to do the work. So when they're out there working hard, it's because they get to walk away after their 5 minute interaction with someone or a day with someone where they can be on their best behavior. But when somebody's working way too hard to present a public persona that's inconsistent with their private persona, then you're not overthinking to say, something fishy's going on here, and trust what you're picking up on. You're not overthinking it. They're in their own chameleon mode. Okay. Okay. Now, here's another one, and from the way it sounds, this may be like a teenager or perhaps a very young adult. So see what you think on this. This one says, "Hi, Dr. C. Can you explain why a narcissistic parent won't do anything for you? Is it because of the power dynamic?" Which is kind of an interesting way for a young person to be putting it, because yes. And then this person goes on to say, "My parent won't take me to school, won't sign me up for any extracurricular activity, clubs, sports, won't take me out in any way at all. And I mean nothing." Okay. So it makes me wonder, is this a teenager who's watching the videos here? And by the way, if you are, man, I'm so glad you're doing it, because now's the time. I just mentioned that you eventually get into that adulting, that adult formation kind of a mindset where you decide what kind of adult you are. And here you are, you're looking at this saying, something's not right here inside my home. And I'm hoping that, and when you say, can you explain why they do it? I go back to that thing of psychological laziness. Narcissists don't want to take responsibility for who they are. They they don't understand that relationships are not just something that just show up. Relationships require a commitment. And if you take on the role as parent, there's a commitment there. If you take on the role as a close friend, or so, there's a commitment there. And part of that commitment means that you're willing to examine yourself and learn and adjust and evolve as the years go by. And unfortunately, somebody that can take on the role of parent or marriage partner or whoever it might be, and it's like, okay, I'm done. I don't want to have to think anymore. Let's just keep this easy. And it's not quite that simple. Now, to this person that's asked the question, I want to give you some inspiration. I have two different people in mind that could say word for word everything you're saying, and each of these, in their own right, is very solid. One is working on his PhD. The other has gotten away from some very unhealthy family influences, and now has a good family situation of her own, where she's working in a way that she's bringing to her spouse and to her children some elements that she did not have. And it's possible for you, as you get away from your own family of origin, to think, rather than just looking at that past that I had and then pointing the finger of blame and saying, I despise, I hate, I'm bitter at whatever I didn't get, you can think, okay, I'm that learner, I'm that intuitive person. And I hope that you can decide, I will take responsibility for who I am, and I'll take the things that I did not like and use it as a springboard for determining what the better alternatives are that I do like. Be that kind of person. And I'm so glad for who this individual is. I can tell you're probably a lot younger. I'm so glad that you're here, and I'm so glad that you're learning. And those of you who are in our on my website with me, if you see a younger person who's kind of in this mindset, give them all the encouragement you possibly can. Okay, now another question. Can someone be both a covert narcissist and an overt narcissist, depending on who they are with or the situation that they're in? And the answer is, oh, yes, that's extremely common. Let me take a different aside. You know that I have a history of doing a lot of anger management classes, anger workshops, etc. And I would talk about the difference between passive aggression and open aggression. And it's not like you get locked in on just one and you don't do the other. When people have anger, they have all sorts of things they do to express their anger. Sometimes they fume and they withdraw. That's passive aggressive. Other times they scream and rage. That's the open aggression. And there's a whole lot in between. And so there are many different tools in their arsenal that they use. It's the exact same kind of thing when we talk about narcissism and the overt versus covert. Some can be just glaringly selfish, and others, they're selfish. It's like, but I'm not going to let you see it. I want you to think that I'm the nicest person that you've ever met. I'm just playing you, but I'm not going to tell anybody. And so, yeah, there's a whole lot, and it's just something that can kind of come and goes because narcissists, in their manipulative spirit, will take a whatever works kind of mentality. It's like, well, if yelling will work for me to be in control, I'll do that. If schmoozing with someone else and trying to appear to be the best friend they ever had will work, I'll do that. If giving the silent treatment works and that makes somebody feel awkward so they finally collapse, then I'll do that. And so, yeah, they can kind of float between all sorts of things. It's not like there's just one variety. They'll just float in between. They are the chameleon. Okay. Oh, okay. And this is another question, and it kind of goes into what kind of therapist you might want to be interested in. This person says, Dr. C, do you feel that someone trying to recover from trauma bond with a long term love with a narcissist should only do therapy with a therapist that has experienced trauma bonding? I started therapy with someone and I felt they had no clue about what I was going through or feeling. And the answer is not 100%. Let's keep in mind that every single one of us, and I include myself, that's in the practice of psychotherapy, we're human, okay? And so we've each experienced our pluses and minuses, and our highs and our lows. And sometimes a therapist has experienced some really severe ones. Other times they've experienced it and it hasn't been as debilitating, but it's like they still know disappointment. And so I'm not going to say that they have to have been through a really bad trauma bond in order for you to work with them about your trauma bonding. Now, having said that, the primary thing is you want to know that you are indeed dealing with somebody who has a very empathetic attitude and a mindset that says, "I want to go in there and help empower you to find out who you are." And so that's going to be my criteria. Uh, Again, all therapists understand the human dimension. You'd like to think effective therapists understand the human dimension, and every one of us has felt it in some form or another. And so, the biggest thing you want to know is this person sensitive enough? And it may be that their sensitivity comes from having been in the trenches more so than the average Joe or Jane out there. It may be because they've been through their own. But the key is I do need to know that I'm with somebody that has a very strong empathy factor, and then the patience to deal with me as I'm trying to get through that. Okay. All right, we have one more question I'm going to go with, and then we'll wrap here for today. And this one, the person asked, "How do you tell the difference between someone who has narcissistic characteristics and someone who has NPD, narcissistic personality disorder? Isn't NPD worse than narcissistic characteristics?" And the answer is you're spot on, 100% yes. Keep in mind, this is something that many people that are in my profession will say, narcissism is a pattern on a spectrum. When we talk about narcissism, we're referring to the human condition, the dark side of the human. And every one of us has at least some of it. Healthy individuals can keep it contained. The way I put it is on a scale of 1 to 100, healthy individuals can keep it down to the 20 percentile level, maybe even a little lower than that. They don't give in to their hatred, or they don't give in to their raw selfishness or their controlling demeanor. They can have healthy assertiveness, but they do it inside the context of respect and dignity, etc. The less healthy a person is, the further they go down that spectrum towards a deep and pathological unhealthiness, the 40% level, 60% level, 75% level. And then when we talk about NPD, the full-blown narcissistic personality disorder, we're talking about those who are way down on the far end of the spectrum, where they are so eaten up by their selfishness, by their manipulations, their willingness to exploit and use people, by their need for dominance, by their insensitivities. I mean, it's so pervasive that they cannot and will not pull out of it. In fact, if anything, they can even be proud of it, or they'll just blame everybody else. And so that's NPD. That's the narcissistic personality disorder. And so it comes down to the fact it's a matter of degree. Okay. All right, Team Healthy, how did you get into this mess? The answer is you showed up in this life because it's all around and it's been here for millennia and it's going to continue to be here. And so the question is not so much how did I get into this mess, although obviously you want to answer that. But the real question is, now that I see myself in a mess, what am I going to do so that I don't continue to perpetuate it? And that's what we do here on Team Healthy. We stand for DRC, Dr. C, DRC, dignity, respect, and civility. And the more people that we can have that says, sign me up for that, I'm all on board, then the better off we're going to be. I hope that in your small sphere of influence, you can have that kind of mindset, and someone's going to be benefited by your presence in it. That's the goal. So, guys, I hope you have a good rest of the day. Hey, today we're recording on 9/11. Our hearts go out to the families that were impacted by the people in 2001 with the 9/11 tragedy. And just please keep them in your thoughts and prayers as you continue to move forward. What a day we have in our history here in America. So just remember that. All right, guys, I hope you have a good rest of the day. Hope you have a good rest of the week. And I will see you same time, same station next Wednesday. Bye.